Welcome to another episode of Rapidly Aging Technology. Today we're looking at one of my kind of side projects and a little bit of technology from the past. Focused on screen right now is the Audio Technica AT-LP120 USB turntable. It does have RCA out, but of course it can also use USB. This is an interesting turntable. Seems to have a lot of DJ features, like a slider to speed up and slow down the record, goofy things like that, a little light that turns on to help you find where you need to put the needle down if you're in a dark area, things like that that help out. But the reason I'm focusing on it today isn't because, hey look, a USB turntable, or even just a modern turntable at all. It's because this is the culmination of technology that came before. Technology that I also possess. So we're going to start at the modern side of things and move backwards a little bit. Now it's a bit hard to call a 33 1/3 RPM vinyl disc for music reproduction as modern, but there we go. As you've been listening, you probably heard behind me is this fellow singing one of his Christmas records, Johnny Mathis, and I'll be sure to stop that there. Don't need the copyright strike, police. Anywho, the reason I even got this turntable was because at my work, in the basement, there were a lot of vinyl Christmas records, just like this one. However, the modern rules at where I work are that the only thing that can be played can be whatever there was on the radio. And so I was given these last year, a big stack of these vinyl records. And this year I want to try to sneak around the rules a little bit. As you heard in one of my previous videos on vintage recording, I have a few microphones to choose from. And with this now, being able to digitize all these vinyl records and all those microphones, my plan is to get all these loaded onto my computer, make a bunch of fake commercial recordings and fake radio announcements, and more or less make a big old playlist, and then sneak in an MP3 player into where I work, hook it up to the radio, because the radio does have an input for an external audio source, and play it. Now I'm sure that everyone there will know very quickly that it's not a real radio station, but it'll have enough of a facade that maybe they'll just let it go. Especially since the Christmas season, I think people are less they're less pleased with corporate rules when they start to mitigate what you can do for the Christmas season. The MP3 player I'm going to use is an incredibly cheap one I found on Amazon, I think for 20 bucks. Fekpeku, however you pronounce that. They put this out. It's a little 8 GB model. Nothing too fancy. So there you go. It kind of has the appearance of an older style iPod to a certain extent, with an actual buttons, which I do appreciate. I'm not a fan of touchscreens, just because it's not a button. You're not feeling anything. One button on a touchscreen feels just like the rest. You never know when you're on a button or in between. Ugh. Anyway, so that's the goal. Now, how am I digitizing these records? The simple answer to that is the Creative Smart Recorder program that came with my sound card. Now, the USB output of the turntable is limited to a 16-bit 48,000 hertz output, though if I wanted to record at a higher fidelity level, I would just plug into the back of my Sound Blaster and I could do much higher. But for what we're doing, it doesn't really matter. And some people would argue that 16-bit at 48,000 hertz or 48,000 kilohertz, however you want to word that, would be just fine. Will be just fine all the time for everything. Doesn't really matter. This at least results in smaller file sizes than if I were to go for the full 24-bit, 192, or am I just at 92,000 hertz? 90, yeah, 90, jibber jabber. Anyway, so that's this program, but the focus of today's video isn't to show off this program or recording, because it's a simple matter of hitting record and letting the music play. You don't have to listen to it, you can shut that off, of course. Then it's loaded onto the hard drive. What I'm here to talk about is the granddaddy of the 33 1/3 RPM record, and of course the 45 as well. What we have here is a premier brand phonograph, a 78 RPM wind up phonograph. This would have been one of the lesser brands at the time. The big brands were Victor, Victrola, Victor Talking Machine, which then put out after the external horn machines, which is what you think of as a phonograph, went out of favor in the US particularly. They came out with the Victrola, which is an internal horn system, just like this, where it's more of a piece of furniture that can play records. So there's Victor, the Victor Talking Machine, there was Columbia. Edison was a big one out there for cylinders first, and then they had their own disc system, which I have, but there's a lot of stuff being used as storage right now. You probably noticed that things tend to be a little bit cluttered. Well, this area is being used to store things and whatnot. Anyway, so there's a lot of brands out there. Premier would have probably been one of the lesser brands. This one, machine, probably would have come out, I believe we had it dated probably right prior to the 20s, maybe late teens. Certainly before 1925, when most companies moved to the, as Victor called it, the orthophonic system, which is electrically recorded discs, and then machines with exponential folded horns and reproducers, which is this bit here, that with aluminum diaphragms and whatnot to have greater fidelity, more bass and whatnot. Anywho, that's a bit more than what you're interested in. Anyway, this is the granddaddy of the 33 RPM record. The way it works is pretty simple, and to explain, I will grab a reproducer that's not connected. Here we have a detached reproducer. This is a Joule Electro. This would be a later reproducer designed to sort of handle electric discs using a mica diaphragm. So that's what this clear plasticky bit thing is. That is a mica diaphragm. What the diaphragm does is when the record is played, so there will be a needle here which I will show you how to insert. You just loosen up the little screw there until you can get a needle inside. And these needles, tighten that back up. There we go. Put that in and tighten down. These needles are for one-time use only. The idea behind these steel needles, which these record players use, is that the record, because of the weight of things that were being used at the time, just because that's what the technology allowed for, that's all it could do, you had a choice. Either the needle lasts and the record gets destroyed, or the record lasts and the needle gets damaged. So records of this time, made of shellac, I'm not sure how you pronounce it, have some additives in there to wear down the needle rather than the needle wear down the record. So after you use it once, the pointed tip, even though you won't be able to see it usually with the naked eye very easily, actually gets worn down, and you don't want to keep using it on any more records. Anyway, so the needle is in the groove. And the way record grooves work is that if this is the groove, if this is the groove here, the needle goes in there. As it moves along, the sound waves were recorded laterally. So the grooves will move to one side or the other and cause the needle, when it's going fast enough, to vibrate in accordance with sound waves. And that is translated through the needle bar here, and this one uses a ball bearing system. Goes up the needle bar and then connects with the diaphragm. And the diaphragm works like the a speaker cone, you could say, where the vibrations are translated from here onto the clear diaphragm, and then it vibrates. And that vibration comes out the back and goes through the tone arm or sound tube, and then out the horn. So if we take this, and I'll put it, and if we just tap even the needle, not even at the end of the needle, you'll notice you can hear that, right? I'll put it near the microphone. So in principle, it's working. So that is something, that's how it works. Grooves translate sound up through the needle bar, through the diaphragm, and then it goes through the tube, sound tube, tone arm, and out the horn. It's a very ingenious system, and it works surprisingly well. The Edison system is quite a bit different, and when I do a video on that, I will talk about it. A lot of the same principles are in play, but there's a different way that it's been implemented. So let's show you how you operate this unit. Keep in mind, if you notice that it has a slowdown and then kicks back up during the middle of playing, that's just because this particular unit, its motor was re-greased, and these, if you don't use them too often, which this one has been kind of out of the way, sometimes the grease will like to settle and clump together, so you need to work it, you need to run it through a few times before it unclumps. I tried to do that a bit this morning, but it's also pretty cold, so we'll see how well it plays. But it's not a problem indicative of these machines. This is in fact the only machine I've had that's really had much of a problem. So keep that in mind. We'll do a tour of it, we'll operate it, we'll play a disc, and hopefully we'll play one of my favorites. All right, I'm not sure how good the lighting is for you folks, but we'll do the best we can. Right here's the brake lever. When we release it, the turntable can more or less turn. And when we close it, it locks it up. It's just a little hammer thing, a nubbin that comes up and touches the inside of the turntable. Here we have the speed control, and it's set to pretty well at, it looks like it's on a little slow side, but it seems to be doing at 78 RPM pretty well. And when the motor was worked on, I think it was synchronized a bit. So the records, they sound like they're playing at the right speed anyway, so even though it says it's at more like 73 RPM, it's about where it should be. We of course have the tone arm and reproducer. This is a Premier reproducer. You can see it has its gasket material there, which allows it to actually flex a bit and should be airtight ideally. This system uses, more or less it's held in contact with kind of a spring-loaded surface, it appears to be. And there's the needle chuck. When you find ones that have kind of a triangular shape in them, they were designed to be able to use wooden needles if you had those. And so it goes down. You'll notice that for turntable people, you'll notice that the tracking is not the best. And a lot of these did not have very great tracking, which is you want the needle to be aligned in such a way that the grooves are exactly 90 degrees to it. If the reproducer is off kilter, so if we use the center as the reference point, then the sound isn't transferred as well. There's the potential for more wear because that energy that's trying to be input into the more flexible needle bar and diaphragm setup is actually just kind of impacting on it, causing it to vibrate a bit. So that's what more or less what tracking is. This is also a really short stubby tone arm compared to some other models, so that aggravates it. When there's a longer tone arm, it's just a matter of physics. The movement from here to here has less an effect on the rotational position. I'm surprised there aren't, and there might be super hi-fi systems where they have really long tone arms, but then again, there's also would be more tone arm mass. We close the lid here, and this is a nice shiny piano finish. You have the outside, which, this is worn, this is an old machine, has more of a matte finish, and I think it looks pretty sharp. I just have a Portugal scarf I was given. And the front, we have the speaker grill, which can come out to show you the cavernous grill horn here, which there's nothing much to see. Just a big old gap. Not even sure how well you can even see it. Now we want to go the opposite way, do we? It's missing its keyhole, the actual metal part, but in here is the record storage area. So, operation. You open it up, got your needles here, and you'll end up cranking up the unit. Now, you don't need to crank it all the way up. You'll kind of get a feel for how many rotations you really need to do to give enough energy. But I think this one takes about 45 if you fully wind it. That should be enough to at least get us through a side of a record. It's probably plenty. All right, so then you need to get the record out. Kind of an awkward position, but out of my record album, I pulled out one of these orthophonic records. So this particular record is the Burgundy Foxtrot by all those folks, with the vocal refrained by the silver-masked tenor. Mysterious. So when you see this label in the VE, these were recorded electrically, which was actually kind of a new deal back in 1925, because records were previously made without any microphones or electricity. Yes, you can do it. More or less, you take something, this type of system, and reverse it. The speaker would sing into a horn. That horn would translate the sound down a system onto a diaphragm and a cutting head. And then the sound would be inscribed into a wax master disc. And from that wax master, molds could be made. And then those would be used to press these. And as you can see, the material isn't the same as standard vinyl. It's kind of hard and brittle. And it has additives in it to wear down the needle a bit. So by default, there's some kind of intentional noise. Well, not intentional noise, but there's some grittiness to it. However, the nice thing about these older machines is because they have these stiff, overall they're much stiffer than like a modern cartridge. They kind of try to filter out some of that. It's very interesting. So what we're going to do is get this opened up here. And since you folks are special, rather than do a little soft tone needle, I'll use one of these more kind of medium to medium heavy tone spear tip needles. The theory behind these was that if you wanted a quieter, playing experience, you could make sure that the flat edge is in line with tracking. And if you wanted a louder one, you do the thin edge, because that'd be stiffer, and so more music would translate. Overall, I can't really tell much of a difference doing that, but they sound pretty good. So let's try to load one of these on here, one-handed. There we go. So we got that in there. Let's rotate that. There we go. All right, needle is loaded. Now I have a brush in the other room that after I kick on the turntable, I will, wipe these down before I play them, just to pull out any dust. But this one's been played before. It's pretty clean, as you can tell. It is, of course, worn. Most of these things are. And these sound best on an orthophonic machine, a machine designed to play records like this. So now, what you'll end up doing is removing the brake, and then put the needle down.
across the sea to you. In memories of Burgundy, I see your eyes aglow. When the shades of nighttime gather, there's no other face I'd rather see than yours so true. Burgundy is calling me across the sea to you.
There you go. And then there's the infinite loop, so that you know, so that it doesn't just go and cut into the label, which some earliest records had a tendency to maybe do. And so there we go. That was the Burgundy Foxtrot, one of my favorites, and a tune kind of indicative of the foxtrots of the time. Very snappy, there's a lot of banjo in there. It's this early hot jazz era of music, and there's a vocal refrain right in the middle. Very likely a lot of these songs were complete songs with full lyrics, but at least the dance foxtrot versions will only have a vocal refrain. The intro to my channel is a recording, now using, it's an old one used with a, not this camera, of me and my shadow. Another record just like this, only on a Columbia's version of the orthophonic series, the Vivatonal record. Anyway, some of my favorite music, I really do love this era of sound, and I think these machines can sound very good. I'm not sure how well it'll translate into the mic for you guys to hear, but I think they sound very good. Edison ones sound even better. Even Edison's acoustic recording, so no electricity, those records can sound very lifelike and have very quiet surfaces. However, some Edison diamond discs, when they're going through shortages of certain materials during World War I, they tended to get very noisy surfaces, and then it took them a while to get back to some of the earliest, very, very smooth surface records. But that's I found this very pleasing, and just for comparison, we're going to put this on that Audio Technica with a cartridge designed for 78 RPM records using a magnetic moving magnet cartridge system, and I'll be sure to put the cartridges of that machine in the text of this video because I don't remember what they are, and we'll hear a comparison. So from a mono recording through a whole acoustic system out on an acoustic horn, so single speaker, to going on a modern turntable and then being processed by a sound card to make it surround, go through the side speakers and the subwoofer. And we'll see how that sounds. Hopefully you'll stick around too. If you found that song snappy, you'll enjoy hearing it again, but on a different type of system. Well, there are a couple things I forgot to mention. You notice the sound changed, hopefully you heard it, when I closed the lid. That's because not only does that block out some of the surface noise directly off the record, but because of the way these diaphragms work, not only is sound going through the sound tube, but the inverse of that sound is coming out the other end. It's like it's its own little speaker. So when you close it, you lose what is kind of brighter. Because since it's a smaller little thing, it has a kind of brighter sound coming through here, but more noisy. when sound's only coming through the horn, it's I think a little more on the mellower side. So that's one thing you can do with these to reduce some of the surface noise, is closing it up, and when you stand farther away from the machine, it tends to drop out a little bit. Let's see, another thing to note, once you're done with the needle, you immediately remove it, and in this case, you put it into that little nubbin back there with all the used needles. That was awkward. Didn't hit the record though, so that's fun. Anyway, that's about it. When you're done, you can let these things wind down, and then just put on the brake and seal them up. If you're ever going to, you can also, if you want, you can wind them just to give them a couple of cranks afterwards and then keep them locked just to keep a little bit of tension on that spring. If you're moving the machines and they're in a situation where the brake is effective, even with however you're moving it, it's good to do that too so the spring doesn't come unhooked off of the spring barrel. Some things to keep in mind with these machines. I think they're great, and there of course are different machines out there. There are machines done by Victor. So this is like that other reproducer. This is a Victor, or at least his master's voice, the British version of Victor. Number 4 reproducer, designed to be a nice hybrid for electrical records and standard records. I rebuilt this one and sealed it in wax. This is good for older machines trying to play electrical records. The larger diaphragm is the key. And on earlier machines, you'll have the Victor Exhibition. This one is a kind of a very early one, and also a little on the rusted side. It has luckily been rebuilt. You can tell it's early because it has a round needle chuck. All the later ones usually had triangular, so you could use wooden needles. But this one was rebuilt for me. It uses a spring system, as you can see, to hold the needle bar in place. So it's going to be stiffer than later reproducers. These ones were designed for early acoustic records, which didn't have as much volume or dynamic range. So these are perfectly acceptable. And they have their own nice sound quality too. They're not bad units. The Victor number 2, which I may find a picture of, is nice in between. This one has a different mounting system for the rubber back flange. Yeah, interesting pieces. So let's hear this record on a modern system. All right, so one of the first things we'll do is I put the record on here. You press both buttons, so this is 33 and 45, press them together, you get 78. This isn't really a review of this turntable, otherwise I get in closer and do all that. You'll find some good reviews by people who are more in touch with this whole world of vinyl, hi-fi, whatnot. They've done reviews of this turntable, so if you're interested, take a peek at it. It's a really solidly built, heavy-duty unit. I think it will serve most of your purposes, and it has a built-in preamp that you can shut off if you don't want to use it, or turn it on if you do, so that the signal coming out of the RCA connectors either has some volume to it or isn't, so you can manipulate it how you want to do. But I'm just using USB right now just for the sake of convenience. Anyway, so what we'll do is we'll just put the protector back on this particular head. There we go. So after you put the cap on, then you just twist this collar to remove the whole head shell unit. There we go. Out it goes. And the head wants to, and the whole tone arm wants to move. So this is the stock unit that comes with it. It does its job. And in the back, you'll see that I have a spare. Rather than switching out cartridges or goofy things, I just got a separate head shell. The head shell was about 20 bucks, so it's kind of worth it. The cartridge was more than that. So this is the replacement, the one that works with 78 RPM records. The diameter, the size of the head is actually, what, like 3 times bigger? 3 times the size? So it is much larger because the grooves are much larger. And the cartridge is built using different principles to try to collect the sound. So we'll reattach this, and it has a little protective flip down visor cover type of deal, which is handy. So we'll put that back on. All right, so that's in. However, we're not ready to go yet because the tracking force recommended for this cartridge is not 2 grams like it is for the vinyl. It's at 5. Now, some of you vinyl folks are probably, I don't know, cringing a bit. And that's probably because that's a pretty big number for you folks. From my understanding, vinyl was originally designed to handle 5 grams. However, we're not dealing with vinyl. This is shellac. And if you remember looking at that turntable in there, that phonograph, that big reproducer and arm, those are heavy. Those are far more than 5 grams. They're massive as far as weight goes. So this is a breeze. This record can handle 5 grams all day, every day. It's nothing to it. So we need to fix it. So right now it's at 2 grams, and we got to turn the weight and the dial with it, which is a bit hard, especially one-handed. So we're going to do that. Now, it maxes out officially, like at least on the dial, at 3.5. As you can see here, maxes at 3.5. Or I guess you could say 4 when you scroll over to 1. Well, you just have to do some math now. 3.5, 4, 4.5, and 5. So remember, be sure to switch that back when you switch to standard vinyl. And now we're going to have this thing start playing. Let's click that on. Oh, don't forget to lift the cover. So that's about right. And then we have the cueing lever. This is what 33 RPM sounds like.
Burgundy is calling me across the sea to you. In memories of Burgundy, I see your eyes aglow. When the shades of nighttime gather, there's no other face I'd rather see than you're so true. Burgundy is calling me across the sea to you.
So there we have it. The same record played twice on two different systems. I'm not sure how well it translates into the microphone onto the camera here, but that recording, the surface noise almost bothers me more when it's on this sort of thing, because it's a different kind of noise. When it's on the machine, it's a very mechanical, kind of, I don't know how I want to describe it, metallic. I understand the sound, it makes sense to me. It's like the physical needle seems to be the source of the sound. On this, it's just, I don't know. Your mileage may vary. I just find that I like the surface noise, the tone of it, better on the acoustic machine. As far as the music itself, it did seem to come out a bit cleaner. There's less blaring, obviously, because there's more. The cartridge here is more compliant, so it's not going to resist the sound and lift up from the groove and start bouncing around. The bass notes were a little more pronounced, but there's not a whole lot of bass in some of these early recordings. Some of them I'm sure are exceptions, and this one, I mean, it sounds good. It's not overly bassy like a lot of modern things are. But it didn't seem, it wasn't too much there, even with the sound card told to boost the bass levels a little bit. So I hope you found that interesting. I love physical media just in general, but I do love old sound and these old records and these old record players. And this is a nice little tool to have if you're considering something where you want to digitize a bunch of music, or if you just simply don't want to have a full hi-fi setup but still want to play some of these records. This is a decent option for you to choose, I think. And if you want to see full-on reviews of just this unit, the Audio-Technica AT-LP120 USB. Please, look on YouTube. There's plenty of them. You can read reviews on Amazon and whatnot. It's a good unit. But the goal was to let you listen to some of these old records and some of the old sound. If you find this interesting, tell me, because I have records that were recorded acoustically without electricity, which you may want to hear. And I might do another video showcasing those. I also have my cylinder player, which I need to break out and show you folks, and my Edison Diamond disc system. So thanks for sticking around. I hope you liked this. Video. Like and subscribe to the channel. Blah blah blah. Those things that YouTubers always say. Send me money. That sort of stuff. And don't forget to join the Retro Machines group on Facebook. It's growing exceedingly large now, and some big guys are on there like Victor Bart, Phil's Computer Lab, some other folks. Anyway, thanks for watching. Have a Merry Christmas. I may come out with a video before then. Well, I mean, I got time, but maybe not. Anyway, you have a great day, and I will see you around the channel. Goodbye.